This morning, you picked up a small plastic stick, squeezed a stripe of blue gel onto it, and scrubbed your teeth for exactly 2 minutes without thinking about it once. You have done this thousands of times. So has almost everyone you know. But for over 99% of human history, that ritual did not exist. No toothbrush, no toothpaste, no dentist waiting down the street with a drill. For roughly 300,000 years, your ancestors chewed, bit, and gnawed their way through raw, tough, fibrous food with nothing but their own mouths to protect them. And yet, when researchers pull ancient skulls out of the ground and pry open the jaws, they keep finding something that should not make sense. Straight teeth, full arches, almost no cavities. Rows of enamel worn flat from years of hard use but rarely rotted, rarely crooked, rarely missing. So here's the question that should bother you a little. If your ancestors had none of the tools you rely on every single day, why did their mouths so often outperform yours? There is a partial answer, and it is stranger than you'd expect. In the 1930s, a dentist named Weston A. Price traveled to remote communities around the world, from Swiss alpine villages to isolated Pacific islands, and photographed thousands of mouths. In groups still eating traditional, unprocessed diets, he documented cavity rates close to zero, broad jaws, teeth that lined up like a picket fence. Then he photographed the children of those same families after the community had started importing refined flour and sugar. In a single generation, the jaws in his photographs narrowed. The teeth crowded together. Nothing about brushing habits had changed, something else had. But that is only the beginning. Because the deeper answer is not about a lost hygiene secret. It is about something you're doing to your own jaw right now, every day, without realizing it. Your jaw is not a fixed shape you were born with. It is a structure that grows in response to force. Every bite, every chew, every hour spent tearing through something resistant sends pressure through your jawbone, and that pressure tells your bone where to grow and how wide to become. Ancient humans chewed constantly. Wild roots, raw meat, unprocessed grains, nuts, tough plant fiber. Anthropologist Peter Ungar, who has spent decades analyzing microscopic wear patterns on fossil teeth, has shown that the diets of early humans demanded dramatically more chewing force and chewing time than anything most of us eat today. That relentless mechanical stress widened the jaw and the dental arch during childhood development, leaving enough room for every tooth to grow in straight. Now compare that to your own week. Soft bread, ground meat, pre-chopped vegetables, food engineered to require almost no effort at all. Your jaw never receives the signal to grow wide because it never has to work. Here is a number worth sitting with. Some researchers estimate that early hunter-gatherer diets required several thousand more chewing cycles per day than a typical modern diet. Thousands of extra repetitions of force, pressing outward on the jaw day after day, year after year, from early childhood onward. That is not a small difference. That is closer to the gap between a muscle that lifts weight every day and one that never leaves the couch. Your jawbone is living tissue. It responds to demand exactly like any other bone in your body, and for most of your life, you have been asking almost nothing of it. This is why so many people today need their wisdom teeth removed at all. Ancient jaws, widened by relentless chewing, usually had enough room for a full set of 32 teeth. Modern jaws, shaped by a childhood of soft food, often don't. The tooth isn't the problem. The room it grows into is. Orthodontists see the consequences of this every day without necessarily framing it this way. Braces, retainers, jaw expanders, all of them are in a sense tools built to force a narrow modern jaw to behave like a wide ancient one. An entire branch of medicine exists partly to correct a shape that a different childhood diet might have prevented from forming in the first place. Wait, that is not even the strangest part. Here is a fact most people never hear. The shift toward crooked teeth and crowded jaws did not begin with soda or candy bars. It began roughly 10,000 years ago when humans started farming. Researcher Robert Corrucini, who compared the skulls of hunter-gatherer populations with early farming communities, found a measurable jump in malocclusion, that is, misaligned bites and crowded teeth, almost immediately after groups switched to softer processed grains. The invention of agriculture, one of the most celebrated turning points in human history, was also the moment your species' jaws began quietly shrinking. That agricultural shift did something else too. It didn't just soften the food, it also changed how often people ate. Hunter-gatherers ate when food was available with long gaps in between. Early farmers and every generation since gained something new. A steady, near-constant supply of starchy, fermentable food sitting in the mouth for hours at a time. That matters more than it sounds like it should because of who is actually causing tooth decay. It is not sugar itself. It is a specific colony of bacteria, led largely by a species called Streptococcus mutans, that lives on your teeth and treats sugar like fuel. Feed it, and it produces acid as a byproduct. That acid eats directly into enamel, tooth by tooth, meal by meal. Ancient mouths hosted this bacteria too, but they rarely fed it enough, often enough for it to win. And there's another piece of the puzzle hiding in plaque. For years, scientists assumed ancient dental plaque was just debris, useless residue scraped off old bones. Then biomolecular archaeologist Christina Warner and her team realized that hardened plaque, called dental calculus, actually traps and preserves DNA, food particles, and bacteria for thousands of years. By analyzing calculus from Neanderthal teeth, her research revealed detailed snapshots of ancient diets and oral microbiomes, microscopic ecosystems living inside prehistoric mouths. What her work found was unsettling. The bacterial community in your mouth right now is dramatically less diverse than the one living in a hunter-gatherer's mouth thousands of years ago. Some strains of bacteria that once helped protect ancient teeth appear to have thinned out or disappeared entirely from modern human mouths. You are not brushing away more danger than your ancestors faced. In some ways, you are managing a mouth that has already lost part of its natural defense system, then trying to compensate for the loss with a tube of paste. Think about what that means. The oral microbiome, the invisible ecosystem living on your teeth and gums right now, is not the same ecosystem your ancestors carried. It shifted as diets shifted, generation after generation, until it became something new, something less resilient. You inherited a changed battlefield, not a lost war. Sugar deserves its own reckoning here too. Refined sugar barely existed in the ancient world. Wild honey was a rare, seasonal treat, not a daily ingredient hidden inside sauces, drinks, and bread. Ancient humans were not virtuous, and they were not disciplined in some way you are not. They simply were not constantly feeding an invisible colony of acid-producing bacteria 3 or 4 times a day, the way most modern diets now do, almost without anyone choosing it on purpose. There's one more layer, and it explains where the toothbrush actually came from. Many ancient cultures did clean their teeth, just not with brushes. Twigs from trees like the neem tree, chewed at one end until the fibers frayed into soft bristles, were used across parts of Africa and Asia for thousands of years. Researchers studying these chew sticks have found that some of the trees used contain natural antibacterial compounds, meaning the twig wasn't just scrubbing food away, it was actively fighting the same bacteria that toothpaste targets today. Ancient Egyptians ground pumice and mixed it with wine vinegar into an early paste. Ancient Greeks and Romans experimented with crushed bone and oyster shell as an abrasive. Long before synthetic bristles existed, humans across separate continents independently arrived at the same basic idea, because the instinct to clean the mouth is old. What changed was never the desire for clean teeth. What changed was the food arriving in that mouth every single day. Picture the two mouths side by side, an ancient jaw and a modern one, thousands of years apart, judged not by how they were cleaned, but by what they were asked to process. One was built by decades of resistance, the other was shaped by decades of ease. Sit with that for a second. You now have more dental tools than any generation in history. Toothbrushes, mouthwash, floss, whitening strips, twice-yearly cleanings, And dental health in industrialized nations is still worse in some ways than it was in populations that had none of it. According to the World Health Organization, untreated tooth decay is the single most common health condition on the planet, affecting billions of people despite unprecedented access to dental care. Think about how strange that actually is. Never in history has a species had more tools built specifically to protect its teeth, and never in history have so many of its teeth needed protecting. That is not a failure of effort, and it is not a failure of willpower either. It is a mismatch. Your mouth evolved for a world of tough, fibrous, unprocessed food that built wide jaws in childhood and left little room for bacteria to thrive. Your ancestors' mouths were shaped by resistance, by constant chewing, by long stretches of time between meals, by an ecosystem of bacteria your body had spent hundreds of thousands of years learning to balance. You are living inside a body still calibrated for that world, while eating in a completely different one, several times a day, every day, for your entire life. We built extraordinary tools to fight a problem our ancestors barely had, because we changed the very thing that used to prevent it. The toothbrush in your bathroom is not a symbol of progress over a primitive past. It is a patch invented to compensate for what softer food, more frequent eating, and processed sugar quietly took away, generation by generation without anyone deciding it on purpose. Every morning, you pick up that small plastic stick and scrub away at a problem your ancestors' jaws were built to prevent on their own. You are not cleaning up after carelessness. You are cleaning up after convenience.